Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight at the virtual public meeting on the upcoming summer 2021 MBTA service changes. My name is Michaela Comas, and I am a community liaison on the MBTA's community engagement team, and I will be moderating tonight's meeting. First, the MBTA team has a presentation, and we ask that you please hold your questions and comments until the end of the presentation. Second, we'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being audio and visually recorded and will be publicly available soon. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few meeting controls for folks who may not be familiar with Zoom. So we will have live language interpretation at today's meeting. I will explain how to select your preferred language now. In English, and written instructions are provided on your screen now in Spanish. In your meeting or webinar controls at the bottom of your screen, please click interpretation. Then click the language that you would like to hear. Even participants listening in English should select English so that they can hear any comments being spoken in other languages. This meeting will also include Asl Interpreters. The meeting host has spotlighted the interpreters to ensure that they can be seen at all times. The Asl Interpreters expect to switch approximately every 15 minutes. If at any point you cannot see the interpreters, please let tech support know using the chat. We also have closed captions for this meeting. If you do not see the captions, please press closed captions at the control center at the bottom of your screen to get them started. If at any point during the meeting you have any technical questions about Zoom or the accessibility features of today's meeting, please chat tech support again. So on today's meeting, on today's call, we are joined by Kat Benesh, MBTA's Chief of Operations, Strategy, Policy, and Oversight, as well as Rob Guptill, Senior Director of Service Planning, Ryan Caholen, Chief Railroad Officer, and Carol Joyce Harrington, Deputy Director of Paratransit Administration. We would also like to acknowledge any of the elected officials who have joined us today. And now I will turn things over to Rob to get us started.
Rob, I think you might be muted.
My apologies, everyone. Sorry, I missed that button. I thought I got it. Thank you, Anne. All right, so my name is Robert Guptill. I am the Director of Service Planning at the MBTA. I'm here to present the overall context we find ourselves in as we look ahead to the specific changes we're making for the summer rating. Having just experienced our first heat wave of the summer, one could be forgiven for forgetting those long winter days when the COVID-19 vaccine had yet been widely distributed. But indeed, the schedule that the MBTA is operating today and will be operating until June 20th reflects the decreased ridership and revenue we were experiencing only a few months ago. In addition to reducing overall service levels, the MBTA has continuously reallocated service to different parts of the system, really going back to the start of the pandemic when we discovered how transit critical populations made up our most resilient ridership. Now, as the economy reopens and travel begins to increase, we are looking to accommodate those new travel patterns in different ways. Next slide, please. Starting on June 20th, we are increasing service levels across the region. We will continue to preserve the frequency improvements that we've instituted on several key routes serving transit critical communities. At the same time, we are trying as best we can to forecast where ridership may return and provide sufficient service levels, also while supporting new travel patterns and behaviors that have emerged during the pandemic. Next slide, please. We'll speak to some of those patterns throughout the presentation, but the one I wanted to highlight here is the gradual increase in overall ridership levels. In general, we've seen a modest increase in trips being taken across the system for the past several weeks. Ridership on bus, subway, the ride, and commuter rail increased between 2 to 4% compared to last week. That being said, today's trip numbers are still well below their pre-pandemic levels. Next slide, please. Now we'll get into more specifics about the changes on subway, bus, commuter rail, and the ride. Next slide, please. We'll start with subway. Next slide. The chart in front of you shows the gradual week-by-week ridership increases I mentioned previously. The blue line has been the most resilient rapid transit route throughout the pandemic and continues to show the smallest decrease in ridership compared to 2 years ago. Overall, gated stations are registering about 68% less validations than they were pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. One of the patterns we've seen across the modes is a significant decrease in peak period ridership compared to pre-COVID, compared to more resilient ridership in the off-peak periods. As a result, when comparing the upcoming summer schedule to the current spring schedule, we are improving frequencies throughout the day, but those frequencies are increasing at greater levels during the off-peak periods. For example, average headways, the time between two trips, those are improving by almost a minute during the AM peak on the orange line, but during the midday, they are improving by almost 4 minutes. Similar time of day ratios can be seen across all the lines. Please go to our website to find the specific subway schedules. Next slide, please. These charts show how trips have shifted around during the day to reflect ridership patterns. And when I say trips, I mean the trips that we provide. As you can see, the difference in trip counts between the peaks and the off peaks is much less than it was pre-COVID. Next slide. We'll move on to bus. Next slide, please. As with subway, this chart shows the gradual increase in ridership on a week-by-week basis. There's a lot more daily revision of the bus ridership data due to slower arrival of information from non-scheduled trips, but you can see that general increase. Next slide, please. There's also a lot of variation between routes. The chart in front of you compares last week's ridership to a 2019 summer baseline. Several routes have percentages of 70% or greater. Next slide, please. As mentioned previously, the strategy we're trying to employ for the summer rating is to maintain service levels on resilient routes, increase frequency where we see or project higher ridership, and restore service in several places. Please visit our website for all upcoming schedules for each bus route. Next slide, please. All of this information can be found on our website at www.mbta.com/service changes. But as you can see, there is a long list of routes with increased frequency. We're also making routing changes on several routes due to the last summer of work on the Harvard Busway. We are restoring 4 routes, the 18, the 52, the 55, and the 68. But in several cases, not with the same pre-COVID schedule. So please, once again, check the website for specific information. Next slide, please. Finally, there are many routes with schedule updates due to updated bus travel times. And now I will turn it over to Ryan, our Chief Railroad Officer, to talk about commuter rail changes.
Thank you very much, Rob. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Caholen. I'm the Chief Railroad Officer for the MBTA. So this evening, I'm going to discuss summer 2021 commuter rail schedule changes. This new commuter rail schedule being implemented on July 3rd, which will largely reflect lots of components of the service, but it's going to focus on continuing to redefine commuter rail as a regional rail service. This is on the tails of the weekday schedule changes that were enacted on April 5th, 2021, with goals of reducing journey times for many riders, maintaining evening service on all lines, as opposed to stopping at 9 p.m., and then, as planned, reintroduce weekend service on all lines with a focus on watching and reducing operating costs. Next slide. We will be restoring weekend service to several lines effective July 3rd, 2021, including the Haverhill, Lowell, Fitchburg, Needham, Franklin, Kingston Plymouth, and Greenbush line. As has been running the entire duration, weekend service will be operating on the other remaining commuter rail lines. Next slide, please. Now, I did mention redefining commuter rail service, and I mentioned regional rail. And what that translates into is regular intervals of trains throughout the service day to explore a model to attract new or returning riders. New travel patterns may emerge to guide the reshaping of the service in a post-COVID world. Traditionally, we always run the AM, PM heavy peak service with gaps in service throughout the midday. And this new schedule, this new method of operation changes that and keeps an even interval of train service throughout the day, so passengers have options from the start of service right through till the end. The baseline schedule that will be in place provides a foundation for additional capacity and services to be added when they're needed to support increased demand. We watch demand really closely, and we are ready to respond accordingly. Working with Keolis, we will begin a marketing campaign focused on education of this new service model and schedule to encourage more customers. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Carol Joyce Harrington, Deputy Director of Paratransit Administration, to discuss the ride and paratransit.
Thank you, Ryan. Again, my name is Carol Joyce Harrington. I am the Deputy Director of Paratransit Administration, otherwise known as the RIDE. And thank you for having me this evening. What I wanted to discuss was just a few changes on the RIDE, consistent with the MBTA's decision to remove capacity restrictions from vehicles on fixed route. Ride sharing has also been fully reintroduced as of May 29th, 2021. What this means is that multiple customers are once again being scheduled on a vehicle at the same time, along with their individual PCA and/or their guests. The booking window has been increased so that customers may now book trips 1 to 5 days in advance. During the pandemic, we were only booking trips 1 to 3 days in advance. Prior to that, we were booking 1 to 7. What we're doing now is 1 to 5. The Ride Eligibility Center is still closed for in-person appointments until further notice. All interaction with TREC, including ADA visitor requests, will be conducted during business hours over the phone. Their phone number is 617-337-2727. And just a reminder, safety is the ride's primary concern for all involved. And with that in mind, all riders as well as drivers are required to wear face coverings while on MBTA vehicles, including those who are fully vaccinated. All MBTA fleet vehicles are disinfected on a daily basis. Again, these changes were effective as of May 29th and have been communicated to RIDE customers. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Michaela.
Hello, everyone, again. If you are interested in plugging into any more of the service changes and updates or any of our initiatives, here are a list of upcoming meetings and dates that you can plug into. And now we will go into our Q&A portion. And again, I would just like to go over some rules and controls for the meeting. Again, if you have any questions, you can submit them via the chat pod. While we may not get to all questions, all comments are a part of the meeting record and will be shared with MBTA leadership. To make a comment aloud, you must virtually raise your hand. To do this on the computer, please press Alt-Y or click the raise hand button at the bottom center of your screen. On a mobile device, tap the raise hand button in the bottom center of your screen as well. On the phone, dial *9. On your raise hand, once you raise your hand, you'll be added to a queue with others who have raised their hand as well. I will call on folks who have come first, and when it is your turn to speak, I will say your last name or the last 4 digits of your phone number, and I will let you know that I am unmuting you. If you are on a computer or mobile device, a box will pop up in the center of your screen. You will need to confirm that I have unmuted you properly before you begin speaking. If you are on the phone, an automated recording will let you know that you are unmuted, and you may speak as soon as the recording finishes. Once you are unmuted, everyone in the meeting can hear you. So before you make your comment, please slowly state your name and any organizational affiliation that you may have. Please remember to speak slowly as we have interpreters working with us this evening. As soon as you are finished, you will be muted again. And with that, I will try and unmute folks. So last name Alexander, I'm going to be unmuting you now.
All right, my name is Jarek Alexander. I go to Boston Green Academy. I wanted to ask formally, how come the route number 503 has not made it into the list where it will come back into the summer rating? I and a bunch of other students take that route every day, or we did before it was shut down before COVID, and we'd like to see it make a return because at the moment, the only bus that we could use is the 501, and that's not really a route that comes as often as the 503 did, and it was kind of good to have both of those options at the same time. That's all I had to ask.
Hi, this is Robert Guptill, Director of Service Planning, so I can definitely field that question. Thank you for the question, and just so some people, so everyone is aware, back last year, we combined routes 501 and 503, as Jarek mentioned. Formerly, one route went to Copley and one route went to the downtown. We did a similar thing for routes 502 and 504, similarly combining them so that the new combined routes, both the 504 and the 501, serve both Copley and downtown. We found that was easier to schedule because we had reduced ridership, obviously, during COVID times. We were able to provide a more consistent schedule. And certainly as ridership increases, particularly these more commuter-oriented routes, we're keeping an eye on them to see where we need to increase frequency. But our general thought is that in a situation like this, where we can combine two routes together and get a better frequency on the combined route than we would on any individual route, that is potentially a better solution. And we will continually look at things and adjust. And we thank you for your comment, and it will encourage us to continue to look at the 501.
Thank you for that. David Batter, I'm going to be unmuting you now.
Hi, my name is David Bader. Similar question to the last one. I was curious to know about the status of the 326 route that was canceled. It was an express bus that went through Medford and went to downtown.
I can take that one as well. So the 325 and 326, they were also express bus routes, largely fielding commuter-oriented traffic. So during the pandemic, obviously ridership on those types of routes decreased dramatically. So those were some of the routes that we did cut back when we were trying to save resources during the pandemic. As we think about bringing resources back, and we're going to be doing more of this as we look ahead to the fall as well. Again, we're seeing where that traffic is happening, where the demand is happening. Our thought for the 325 and 326 presently is that if we improve the frequency on local bus routes, such as the 100, the 95, and the 101, these local routes can get people to the Orange Line, which currently does have capacity to get people downtown in about the same amount of time. So that's our thinking, but as I mentioned previously, we are continually adjusting. So we've heard many comments in support of bringing back the 325 and 326. We'll continue to read those comments and take them into account.
Last name Wong. I'm going to be unmuting you now.
Hi, I have two questions related to commuter rail, more clarifying questions than anything. So there was the mention of all weekend services being restored. Bravo. I do appreciate that. I'm sure many other people do as well. But I just wanted to ask just for clarification about the Rockport and Gloucester stations, because I know that they've been closed for construction purposes, but yet I did not see them listed under the list of stations that would remain closed. The list of stations that included like Hastings and Silver Hill did not include Gloucester and Rockport. So I was wondering if when full service is restored, is Gloucester and Rockport stations going to remain closed? And then someone also mentioned the Kingston Plymouth line, but I assume that service to Plymouth is not coming back yet either because of the operational problem with the end of the line there. Just want to clarify those two things.
Ryan, do you mind answering that question, please?
I am happy to take that question. Thank you very much for the question. Very well thought out question. Two-part answer. First part for the Plymouth Kingston, we refer to that line as the Plymouth Kingston line, but you are correct. We will be servicing Kingston Station, and at this time, we will not be servicing Plymouth Station. To the second part of your question concerning the Newburyport Rockport in service to Rockport and Gloucester. Right now, because of the construction going on out there with the Gloucester drawbridge, we will continue to operate bus service between Rockport and West Gloucester Station, and also most outbound trains between Manchester and Rockport, so that we can get the work done to complete the Gloucester drawbridge project. So we are serving those stations just by bus, not by train. Once the drawbridge work is done, we will resume regular service.
Thank you for that. There was a comment in the chat that says, can you please explain what rating means? You mentioned summer rating. Can you explain what that means? Essentially, rating is the MBTA's term for the duration of a particular schedule. For example, the summer or the spring rating. The summer rating will run from June 20th to August 28th. And I also see last name Alexander also raised their hand again, so I'm going to unmute you as well.
Okay, so formally add a question about just specific types of buses on specific routes. So I am a normal commuter of Route 57 because my school is in Brighton. Every day in the mornings, my bus is always packed with people. I always have to wait about 2 or 3 buses until it's about reasonable about amount of people, on the bus. I was asking, how would putting 60 footers on the route like work, or what would be a good step to like getting them on that route? Because the 57 was formerly a streetcar line, so a lot of people even nowadays still rely on this route, and I feel as if you put 60 footers on it, similar to the 39, the 28, or the Silver Line, then a lot of these people that are like being left behind, or like can't get on the bus, or if the bus doesn't have enough space with the current 40 footers, that these 60 footers would provide a good solution to like these crowding issues and stuff.
Rob?
Yeah, another great question. Thanks. You have a future in transit planning. So the answer is kind of a technical one. We have one garage that can accommodate these 60-foot articulated buses. That's our Southampton garage. And we only have so many buses that we can fit into that garage. And we have those on the Silver Line routes. We have it on Route 39 and a couple trips on Route 16 that are from the Southampton garage to Forest Hills. So it hamstrings us in terms of where we can put those bus routes. We want to schedule them in such a way that they're efficient of getting to and from the Southampton garage. And we only have a certain number of those bus routes that we have available to us. Certainly, as the MBTA looks towards future bus procurement, many of the things we're looking towards in terms of network redesign, bus garage, bus capacity, the size of buses, different types of buses, those are all things that we are looking towards.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any more questions? So I see that in the chat, there was another question that asked, are there any plans to increase fares with ridership down from pre-pandemic levels? And the answer to that is there are no plans currently to increase fares. Any future fare increases would undergo a significant public outreach process and needs to be approved by our board of directors. And I see that that has spurred some questions and comments. So give me 1 second. First name, Jacqueline. I'm going to unmute you now.
Okay, so this is unrelated to like fares, but I was wondering, like, since there's like 4 routes coming back like this summer, are there like any other routes that are planned to come back later, like in the fall or later than that even? And which routes would those be?
Rob or Kat, would you be willing to answer that question?
I can field that. So yes, there are 4 routes that we are bringing back for the summer rating. We are looking at restoring additional service and additional routes for the fall rating, but our plans are not finalized quite yet. So if you have any routes that you'd like to suggest, please, we're all ears. And we are working on building those schedules right now for the fall rating.
Thank you. There was another question in the chat that says, as the GLX project nears completion, are there plans you can share regarding adding/modifying bus routes to bring riders to the new stations? And the answer to that is I'm actually going to pass it to Kat, actually.
Yeah, I'll jump up and answer that. Hey, Mika, thanks for that. That's another great question. And it's actually being considered as part of our bus network redesign process. So we recently kicked off publicly, I believe actually just on Tuesday, the MBTA is undertaking a broad effort to redesign our entire bus network, knowing that the region of Boston has changed, but our bus network hasn't. And so we're planning to come out with, we're doing public outreach all summer, and then we'll be sending out and beginning to share draft maps later this fall with the intent to then start implementing in 2022. And the timing should work such that when we're beginning to talk through and discuss implementation of bus network redesign is roughly the same time GLX should be opening up, and want to see also how ridership responds and what those ridership patterns are. So we're not going to change any bus routes until after GLX is opened, but then probably within a year of them opening up.
Thank you. Matthew Wong, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, one other commuter rail question. With the restoration of weekend service, are we going to be looking at a regional rail model on the weekends as well, or are we still going to be stuck with the every 2-hour service that we had before the pandemic on the weekends?
I think that might be a question for Ryan.
Yep, correct. Good follow-up question. And to answer your question, right now, the service model on weekends still follows that roughly every 2 hours. And this is an effort to control costs as ridership returns back to commuter rail.
We have another question in the chat that says, in the future, even if the 136 does not come back into service, will the 137 remain as a one-way loop? And I'm going to pass that to Rob as well.
Sure. So again, we haven't decided on anything permanent, in terms of long range vision, and we have the network redesign to make some of those more permanent, hopefully, decisions. But for the summer rating, yes, the 137 will continue to operate the loop around Reading Depot, and we're continually looking at that for the fall and beyond.
Thanks, Rob. And I am going to unmute Poonch.
Thank you very much. How's my audio? Okay,
Good.
excellent. This is a question right for Ryan. Just simply regarding the 5 stations which still remain closed. Am I correct that the next schedule cycle where they might, I'm not saying they would, but where they could be reopened would be the beginning of October schedule cycle? Is that right?
So right now, that's what we are looking at. But again, everything right now is so very dynamic. We're watching demand very closely, almost to the daily level. And as we watch demand return, we're ready to respond accordingly to address the service needs of the ridership. So very long-winded way of answering your question. Right now, our next schedule change following the return of weekend service is this fall.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any more questions? And again, if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand using the raise your hand function. I believe you should find them near the reactions. And there's another question in the chat that says, how is the MBTA thinking about students returning in and developing schedules for the fall? And I'm going to pass that over to the popular man, Rob.
well, I don't know how popular I am, but so yes, we're in touch with many different schools. We've reached out to them to find out what their plans are for bell times for the fall rating as we build those schedules right now, as I mentioned previously. Many schools are looking at changing their bell times, and it's a conversation that we definitely need to have as we think about building those schedules. So if there are any schools out there who haven't heard from the MBTA and are changing their bell times, I would strongly encourage them to reach out to us so that we can get that information in.
Thank you. Last name, Alexander, I'm going to unmute you now.
All right. So I have a really important question. So the Columbus Avenue Busway is opening in the not too distant future, as far as I know. When it opens, will the 22 and the 29 to 44 have increased service frequencies upon opening? I don't know if that's a question related to this, but I feel like it's kind of relevant. So
Rob.
Another great question. So we are not planning increased frequencies at this moment on the 22, the 29, and the 44. That being said, with the bus lane, we are hoping to get faster travel times. So the hope very much is that we can reduce the travel times that we're operating at and operate more trips with the same number of buses. So that would increase the frequency. That's the whole reason for doing some of these bus lanes, quite honestly, and to run more reliably.
And if I could jump in, Michaela, real quick, just because this is such a great question, and Rob is absolutely right. I just want to say one of the reasons we take some time before we actually make those changes are because a lot of how the schedules are built, and I realize a lot of people may not realize this, but like a lot of what Rob and Rob's team and his companion team, the scheduling team, do is a lot of statistical analysis of looking at averages and medians and variation and standard deviations of runtime to make sure that when that bus is running, that it's within a band of, okay, we think we see it take between 20 and 25 minutes, therefore we're going to schedule to X to maximize the likelihood that all those buses run on time. And so when we make a big operational change like that, like putting in a bus lane, all of that data essentially needs to be revalidated so that we can, when we essentially, like Rob said, make the time it takes to go from point A to point B faster in reality, reflect that on the schedules. It takes some time, and we're usually lagging a bit. That is something, as I think we build more and more bus lanes in the Boston region, we're hoping to get faster at, so that we have a better sense of the modeling of when we build this type of infrastructure, that we can reflect that in the schedules faster, but we're just not there yet. But it's something that Rob is actually right. Once we have it open and built and have a little more sense of how it's actually impacting operations, we can use the same buses to run more, and more importantly, that variation, like it should go down, right? So rather than taking 10 minutes or 30 minutes, if we always know it takes 20 minutes, it's so important in all things we do is trying to remove variation so that it's as consistent as possible. But it's a great, great question.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat. Where can we access the recording of this meeting? The recording of this meeting will be posted on the event page later this week. So please visit our website at www.mbta.com/events. And if you scroll all the way down to the page, you should be able to find the recording there. And first name Jacqueline, I'm going to unmute you now.
Will there be any plans for like late night or even like 24-hour like owl service anytime soon?
Can you repeat that question for me, actually? Go ahead.
I was wondering about like late night, like night owl service.
Oh, sorry, I didn't catch that last few words. Rob or Kat, would you be willing to answer this question, please?
I can answer that, Kat, or you can step in.
Go for it, Rob. All you.
All right.
More eloquent than me.
Well, so as people know, we have looked at late night service in times in the past. It's been a pilot initiative that was on, that's before COVID, so it feels like a world away right now. I think it is something that we want to look at for bus network redesign, in terms of one of those big questions about how do we provide bus service in the region, and not only where, but when do we provide it? So great question, something that I think we certainly want to have a lot of opinions and voices coming into the process as we talk about bus network redesign.
There is another question in the chat that says, in the last meeting, I saw that there is a possibility that all-day service might return. If this does happen, will rail bus similar to the ones in the original Night Owl pilot program return? Rob or Kat?
Yeah, I don't think we can commit to any routes at this time for bus network redesign. We're still not quite at that process yet. Still very much talking about concepts. So things like late night service is certainly in the wheelhouse right now of what bus network redesign is dealing with. And then routes should come later this summer into the fall.
Thank you. Is there, oh, last name Evans. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, I'm tuning in, having missed much of what's been said so far. So before I speak, it would help to have a little guidance on what you're, are there specific things you're asking people to speak to right now?
We're just asking folks if they have any questions regarding the summer service changes. So if you have any questions about
Yeah, okay, well, thanks. So turn off that noise. I typically take the 83, I live in Cambridge, I typically take the 83 bus from off Ringe Ave in North Cambridge, and the 77. Those are the two buses that I typically take more than any, and I also take the #1 bus sometimes from Central Square to Harvard Square. I am a bit concerned that the 77, my understanding is that, well, there was service reduction on the 77, and I think the 77 was sort of combined with 79. And not only has there been, I think, an impact in terms of frequency, which has been disappointing and will be more disappointing as more and more people return to the buses. And my understanding is that that combination of the 77 and the 79 is planned to continue into the next rating. So that's a bit disappointing if I understand that correctly. And I also just want to stick up for the drivers. I tend to get friendly, get to know some of the drivers, have conversations with them, ask them for their views. I think sometimes T operations don't do that enough to talk to the drivers, who are among the people who understand the routes better than anybody. And I have heard from some of the drivers that they have less time to do the trips, less layover time to take a bathroom break or whatever on the 77. So in addition to the sort of riders' perspective of getting back to full service right away, really, I just want to, bring up that consideration for the drivers and also including their perspectives in route planning, which I think would really lead to some really wonderful, potentially wonderful positive results for the MBTA and for the rider experience. And one last quick thing, and thank you. The 83 bus, when it exits the turnaround at Ringe Ave in North Cambridge by Alewife, literally almost tips over. It exits the turnaround. There's a parking lot. It exits. There's a raised sidewalk, and then there's a dip in the asphalt of Ringe Ave. And I've been bringing this up at the Cambridge Transit Advisory Committee meetings for years. Nothing's been done about it. I would think this would be something where the T would have a concern and would work together with the city administration in Cambridge to address this problem. IQHQ have bought the 26-acre parcel right there by Jerry's Pond, and they're interested in this and have said they're looking at it and ready to move forward. So I just want to flag this as something that should have been done a long time ago, and hopefully the T will work in a positive, expeditious way to address that situation. And thank you for letting me go on.
No, of course, thank you. I believe Rob has comments.
Yes, so certainly a lot there. So hopefully I get it all. Route 77 and Route 79. This was another example of a more commuter-oriented route, like Route 79, being combined with Route 77. And that was something we did as part of service reductions and thinking about better distributing ridership. That is something that we are continuing for the summer rating, and we are still thinking about things for the fall. In terms of the run times, we are continually monitoring our run times and updating them. Certainly, many of you, I'm sure, are experiencing traffic is getting worse and worse as people get out on the roads more and more. And whereas during the height of the pandemic, when there was very little travel activity and our buses were often running very early, now they're starting to get stuck in that same traffic and experience some of that variability that bus lanes like the one on Columbus Ave that we were talking about before are intended to reduce. So we are trying to keep an eye on those run times, and we will adjust schedules as necessary. One, to make sure we have reliable times for our passengers, but two, as you mentioned, to make sure we give enough recovery time for our operators to go to the bathroom, get a break to eat something, take just a moment away from what is a very, very tough job of driving the buses. And I will mention that we do meet with the garages, my department, service planning and the scheduling department. We meet with the garages monthly to raise various issues and any concerns, and we take those up at that time. I will follow up on the issue that you raised about Route 83 and the exit onto Ringe Ave. I hadn't heard that before, but I will definitely try and follow up on it. So all good comments, and I really appreciate them. Thank you.
Rob, again, if you would like to ask a question or propose a comment, please use the raise your hand function. You should find it by participants. Also, you can drop a question or comment in the chat. Right now, I see last name Minard would like to ask a question. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, I'm Demi. This is my first time I left a comment inside the chat box. I'm have a concern about the 44 bus. Why is it only 144 bus on Sunday?
Rob?
Sure. So we certainly want to provide service where we see demand being provided. I don't know specifically off the top of my head, though I could certainly look at it, what the demand on the 44 is on Sunday. But I would assume, I would like to think that we're providing service so that trips aren't crowded. That being said, we certainly try to meet our service delivery policy for minimum frequency on weekends, which for a route like the 44 is every 60 minutes on the weekends. So hopefully we're meeting that. I guess that's the best I can give you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I believe that there is a question in the chat that says, is there any chance of the 131 resuming off peak service in the future? Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty quick on the start video and start mute and release the mute. So just as we are continuing the structure change we made by combining routes 136 and 137 into a 137 that does a loop around Reading Depot, part of that structure change was also making the 131 run only in the peaks so that it would serve between Oak Grove and Malden Center Station, so that the 137 during the peaks would only go to Oak Grove. And then when the 131 doesn't operate in the off peaks, the 137 continues from Oak Grove to Malden Center Station. We are not planning on changing that for the summer rating. And as I said before, we are definitely considering all options for the fall and beyond.
Thank you. And just so folks know, outside of asking a question here or in the chat, you can also send us questions, comments, and concerns to the public engagement at mbta.com email address. And the community engagement team reads those, and we try to get back to those questions, comments, and concerns as quickly as possible. Again, you can drop a question in the chat or raise your hand. But if nobody has any more questions or comments, we can wrap up if that's okay. So again, thank you all for joining us this evening and for sharing your questions, comments, and concerns. Again, a recording will be on the MBTA's event page website. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page, you should be able to find the recording in a few days. Yeah, and again, as I mentioned before, the public engagement email at mbta.com is the best place to send any follow-up questions or concerns. Thank you all very much for attending. And with that, that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you.